And we are live, man. What's good, everybody, man? Appreciate you tuning in to the Bluebloods official podcast of FCS Football Central on Sports Illustrated. Myself, my guy, Coach Fred. Saturday morning mailbag, as always. We only had one live stream this week. Your boy had to get a new roof installed. Busy week, loud, probably not the best to record, but we're back now on Saturday, man. Coach, how you feeling?
Man, I am good. Good, good, good. Morning coffee. Odyssey Maduro. Ready to go. Let's get into it.
Man, I like it. I like it. We got a lot to talk about today, Coach. We kind of changed the topics a little bit last minute, man. We're going to talk about Stephen F. Austin returning to the Southland. No surprise to anybody who at least watches our show, Coach. We kind of talked about this, about a week or two ago. I
Yep.
thought it was going to come a little bit sooner. Supposedly, it's going to be officially announced by the school on Wednesday. But we're also going to talk about favorites to win FCS national awards. We touched on it a little while back. We've been asked about it a few times. So we'll spin the block on that and talk a little bit about who's going to win the Buchanan, Walter Payton, give our preseason picks and see who's right at the end of the day. And then we're going to end the show with the hottest topic on social media right now in the HBCU sphere, which is SWAC head coach rankings entering 2024. Now, what I'm going to do is give my rankings 1 through 12, kind of talk about some of the flaws on how I've seen some of the rankings go. And Coach is going to give you a 1 through 11 ranking because we know who's at the top spot on his list. And this is guy, Ced Thomas, who's been on the show. Shout out to Coach Cedric Thomas. But we got a lot to talk about, man. So let's start it here, Coach. Our guy, a real good friend of the show, man. I've got to meet him at Media Days, one of the best writers out there for Dave Campbell's Texas Football. My guy, Corey Hogue, reported sources have confirmed Stephen F. Austin, coach, headed back to the Southland Conference. Expect announcement expected on Wednesday. They'll return for the 2025. If I'm not mistaken, the 2025 football season, but I want to say they're all the other sports joined on the for the 2024 season. Coach, your first thoughts on this? It won huge loss for the UAC, especially the WAC, but a massive addition for the Southland coach who was on kind of a respirator a few seasons ago, and now they're about to be back up to 12 teams.
Yeah, this jump starts them. But I want to tip my hat. You had it here first a long time ago. We were just waiting on it to come. But I think this is a big deal for them. And I think it's a big deal for the conference because of, all the said realignment that's coming. I think that this puts their conference in a position to where they can kind of say, hey, look at us. This is what we can bring. This is who we can bring, tradition, so on and so forth. So I think this is really big for the Southland.
Yeah, I think when you look at it, like just to go through like the timeline of stuff, Coach, there was a time where Lamar was supposed to be gone and Cardinal Word was going to make the move. Like all these schools were about to depart, and the Southland was going to kind of just be left sitting there with nothing. UIW chose to stay. Lamar returned after just one season. Now you do lose Sam Houston State, but they went to the UAC, made that jump to the
They went
FBS,
up.
so it's fine. But you also, let's not forget, UTRGV is also joining the conference. They launched their football program in 2025, Coach, and that's a program with a bunch of money, a whole lot of support, and is kind of going to be on that Tarleton, I would say, trajectory where, Coach, they've sold more season tickets for a football season that's still over a year away than
Which
some
is
programs
crazy.
sold for this year.
That's
I,
absolutely crazy.
the support's there, Coach. They're signing recruits. Their social media presence is there. They got some badass helmets. Let me just say that the script helmets are undefeated. Anytime your mascot has a script logo on the side of the helmet, undefeated helmet style, by the way. But then you also look too, Coach. I think the biggest conversation surrounding this is not just Stephen F. Austin's departure from the UAC to the Southland. What happens now with Tarleton, Abilene Christian? Both of those are Texas schools that would make sense to move to the Southland. But then also, too, you're at 12 full-time members. What happens to Central Arkansas now, who is a former Southland school? Do they want to stay in the possible ASUN? Because what's probably going to happen, Coach, if Tarleton and Abilene Christian go, the WAC football is pretty much done for the most part. That if that dissolves, what happens to the Utah schools? Utah Tech, Southern Utah, does the Big Sky want them back? Do they make the jump to the Summit League and eventually join the MVFC? I don't know. There's a few options there, but Central Arkansas is kind of sitting out there by itself. Do you bring it to 15 teams? Do you want to be the next CAA and have a bunch of teams in that conference? Or do you jump to 16 teams and find someone else who possibly wants to join you, bring up another D2 school, something like that? I would be very curious what happens. Also, too, if the ASUN keeps Central Arkansas coach, we talked about this on the last episode. There's a lot of D2 schools in that region that they could pull from, the West Floridas, someone like that jumping up and joining, a conference that has some potential, I would say. I just think Tarleton State's decision coach is going to drive the ultimate reaction to this. If Tarleton moves, Abilene Christian's probably coming. And then the question becomes what happens to the UAC conference? Does it just dissolve and the ASUN goes on its own? Or does both dissolve and we just see a bunch of schools jump back to their original conferences? Because North Alabama could go back to the Big South OVC merger, a big addition for that conference. Central Arkansas could probably go back to the Southland. And then what happens to West Georgia and some of these other schools that didn't really have a conference beforehand? Does anyone want them? That's the conversation that you now shift to have.
And that's big for West Georgia, being that they just made that move as well. Uh, uh, I think the Charlton thing makes sense just because of when we're talking logistics, we're talking travel. I think that becomes a big deal, and if they can get Tarleton to come, I think UCA, to me, I think they have to go just because. And now, like you said, the problem becomes, do we have a conference that becomes now a 14, 15, 16 uh, division conference? Now, we split the divisions. How do we go? Uh, but the Charlton piece is the big piece to it. If Charlton comes, there's going to be others come. And then I think the other conference at that point has got to make a decision. How far west do we want to go? Because there's no more going back to the east. There's no more staying in the central because there's nothing to draw from unless you can get those D2, schools to come up, which if they haven't got there yet, then, and I'll just use my spot. I just don't see an Arkansas Tech jumping up and making that move.
No. Maybe a Harding, if
Yeah,
anybody.
I think they may be the biggest that can do that. Maybe one more out of that conference, but West Al, those teams like that, I don't think they are ready to make that jump to help save that type conference. You know what I mean? So I think that conference got to make a decision now if they're going to go west, and how far west they want to go to try to pull teams to come and join them. Because I think it's like I said, I think that makes sense for UCA to go as well.
I will be curious. The SoCon has not been very open to expansion recently. West Georgia would be a heck of an ad for that conference, right? With Mercer right there. And it fits perfectly in the footprint. And it's a team that has been willing to invest in its football program, willing to invest in competing. Why not join like the SoCon? That would be a big addition for the SoCon. I would feel like we've already kind of talked about the SoCon possibly adding like a William and Mary if that ever comes to fruition. But William and Mary seems like they're sticking with the CAA for right now. They've kind of been vocal about that. So now, do you turn your attention to a West Georgia? That would be I think that would be the smart ad there. Now North Alabama probably goes back to the Big South, I would imagine. Perfect kind of region. You're in that conference with UT Martin, Tennessee State. You're right there in North Alabama. I mean, that one makes sense. The question for me with the Southland is, if you get that big, do you go to divisions?
You have to, I think. I feel like you have to, because if you don't, I think you run into, and this is no slight, but I think you run into MEAC problems. You know what I mean? Because there's no way that everybody's going to be able to play everybody. Even if you went divisions, you still wouldn't be able to play everybody, but it at least gives you an opportunity for the championship game where Bluebloods University won their side, Red State, Now, even though we didn't play during the year, we have an opportunity to play for a championship, and that separates the championships. We don't all win a championship because we all went 9-2. Uh, and I think that's just a bad look for a conference that's really big and can actually go to division.
Well, the problem is, one, they couldn't have a conference championship game. The NCAA does not allow the FC. That's kind of what messed up the SWAC's playoff opportunities. Is the conference championship game would be
Well,
too
yeah, I
late.
guess you got to make a decision. Yeah.
Yeah. So like the conversation about divisions for me is more: do you do it to ease the travel on teams? Would be my
Yeah.
thing, is like where you're more likely to play someone in your division, and then you can have a rotational thing where you don't have to travel, but the good thing with the Southland, though, you look, Coach, even though it would be a big conference, travel really wouldn't be.
Everything is,
Everything's right there. Like, so it's kind of weird where, like, if the CAA, you would have to go from Maine to damn near South Carolina. The Southland, you just got to go from Texas to Louisiana. It's just how far in Texas
do I have to go?
are you going? So I think it would be smart. And the other thing too, and shout out to Mr. Reed, man. Desmond Reed's dad, man. Shout out to you for watching the show, man, supporting us, man. We're hoping. I'm going to be tuned in at least to see what Des does at Pitt, man. I always follow those FCS transfers I really like, and I'm excited to see what he does at Pittsburgh. I think he's going to light up the ACC. But the other thing, Coach, so we know the Southland probably about 3 years ago had a mutual agreement with 2 SWAC schools for them to join. Like, that was the first step to trying to rebuild the commissioner, is get 2 SWAC schools who were going to come until Prom accepted the Jackson job. And then they held tight. So now they shifted their attention to bringing back some old schools. Is there, I don't want to put you on the spot because I know the backlash for certain answers, any chance they spin the block on those 2 SWAC schools?
I would say, why not?
I mean, it can't hurt to make the phone call at least, right? I mean,
why not? And then and let's just be honest, timing is everything.
Yeah.
And right now, that would be the talk of the internet for a calendar year at least.
Mm-hmm.
And then even if just one of those teams accepted, that would be the talk of the internet for 2 calendar years.
Oh, yeah.
And that's all you want to do, is generate that type of, energy around your program, around your conference. So, I mean, why not? I think it would make sense for them too.
I think they should.
I don't know. I don't know if those schools should accept, but
No,
at
I'm
that
not saying,
point,
yeah, I'm not going to speculate on that, but I
yeah,
do
yeah.
think,
I just want to make sure everybody knew that's what we were doing. But yeah, phone call don't hurt.
Especially because I know, I do know, the Texas schools will be a tough pull, especially because, if I'm not mistaken, Texas Southern is a founding member of the SWAC. Tough pull, but the sell there would be, man, you would play like damn near every Texas FCS school in the country.
Location and travel.
The travel would be nothing at that point. And then you also got the 2 Louisiana schools as well in that conversation. So those are the 4 schools that would be the targets for the Southland. You would have Southern, Grambling, Texas Southern, and PV. And I think PV would be a massive target for this, like with the facilities and everything. Yeah. PV would be a massive target for the Southland. Now, here's what we're going to do, Coach. I know Commissioner Grant for the Southland. That's my guy. I talk to him every time I see him. He's one of the nicest commissioners. Coach, at Media Day, he went out of his way to come talk and introduce himself to every single media member at Southland Media Day. One-on-one. Like, that's my guy. I might have to reach out to him, get him on the show, and we'll really talk some expansion plans and things like that, break it down for the Southland. But I don't think it would happen, but I do think they at least try to reach out, because I just don't know what the target number is, right? Because I don't think you go above 16. Anything above 16 would be outrageous. But what happens to Central Arkansas goes a different direction? And then what happens if
what's your plan B?
Abilene Christian goes a different direction?
What's your plan B?
That changes the conversation completely. But I think West Georgia is such an interesting target now. If the ASUN doesn't do anything, if I'm the SoCon, if the SoCon doesn't grab on, the Big South OVC needs to be on the phone right this second.
Got to. Just the location, the location, the commitment that they've made to football, I think that just becomes an add-on for your conference, for your landscape, man. I think that's a must. That you got to at least see what the interest is. It doesn't hurt to see what the interest is.
Yeah, and
New
like I've said,
program, shiny new stuff. Why not?
yeah, and like I said before, if the MVFC is going to let Murray State in, I'm looking at Central Arkansas or Eastern Kentucky. Way more quality ads there for them than Murray State. And no offense to Murray State. I'm sorry if you're a Murray State fan, player, coach, but
I just saying in the moment.
Yeah, in the moment right now, listen, and Coach Wright could build a contender there. I really like that hire as head coach, but Murray State has not been the team that it once was for the most part. Now listen, riding a horse around the field for touchdowns, kind of dope. I like the celebration, but that's really all they really bring to the table right now. Now, basketball is a different conversation. That's a good ad. Murray State basketball, especially in the John Morant days, was a killer. But I just don't see the why you wouldn't even consider a Central Arkansas or Eastern Kentucky if you considered Murray. But coach, let's shift topics here because I know the last topic they're gonna have us on here for 4.5 hours with the last topic. But favorites to win FCS national awards in the 2024 season, coach. Me personally, I made a list of my top 5 guys for each award. And then I gave 2 honorable mentions for each one. So I'll kick this one off because I do think we're going to have similar ones, especially number 1 for let's start with the Walter Payton coach. The
that
number
kid,
one,
the kid,
number 1 favorite, Mark Gronowski, South Dakota State quarterback. Anytime a returning guy is coming back, especially coach, there's an interesting storyline. If I'm not mistaken, I got to look up what the overall record is. I gotta if they go undefeated this year in the FCS, not even that Oklahoma State game, I think he makes a run at the winningest quarterback of all time in FCS history.
That's crazy. Thinking of the quarterbacks that have come from the FCS lineage, that's absolutely crazy.
Because if you really look at his career, coach, as a starter, Mark Gronowski has lost, I think, 1 FCS game in his career.
And I think, because his other losses were the game
the Iowa game, where they only lost by 1 point in that game on the road to a ranked Iowa team. I mean, you're looking at him, coach, as I know. Listen, the bar is so high, especially when you get into the Steve McNairs and the Jerry Rice and the Cooper Kupps. But when you really have a conversation about the greatest players to play at this level, and I don't want to jump the gun too much, he's
at the end of the
putting
day
himself in that conversation. If he wins 3 straight FCS national championships, and let's put it in even more perspective, coach. If Mark Gronowski was healthy and didn't get hurt in the championship game in the spring, he might have 4 rings.
Yeah, they won again.
Every year he's been the starter coach, he has led them to the national title.
That's a heck of a leader. And no one really, I don't want to say knows about him, but just imagine if he plays a little farther east.
Yeah.
For whatever program, a little farther east, how the hype machine, I think, would really be attached to this young man because, he's something to watch in person as well. Very impressive.
Yeah, I think he's got to be in that conversation. Now, another guy I really, really like, coach, and the only question I have is some of the weapons. Listen, we just talked to about this kid, Desmond Reed leaving kind of changes the offense. Now, as much as that's one less weapon for him, coach, I almost think that opens up the possibility that he throws even more, right? And this is Cole Gonzalez. For Western Carolina. Coach, last year he was hurt, but he led the number 1 offense in the nation last year. And I think as a sophomore, because you know this, coach, from freshman year to sophomore, you want a player to improve, but you also kind of get that sophomore slump worry. Sophomore to junior is really where a player, if he's that guy, takes that jump.
Yeah.
If he does that, this kid's potential is through the roof. And I think when you look at the history of the Walter Payton, it's a quarterback award. And if he goes
Oh yeah.
out there and he's leading the country in passing, Western Carolina makes a run for the SoCon, some stuff like that. In that Kerwin Bell offense, you're always going to put up numbers. I think Cole Gonzalez has a really, really, really good shot to win that award for the Catamounts, which would be a huge step forward for that program, man, who has really not competed at the highest level up until recently.
Yeah, and I'm a Cole fan, and I think if the changes hadn't happened, I think that he is, of course, the returner is one, but I think he's 1B. So it'll be interesting to see how he handles those changes that have come from the coordinator to probably his best player to losing his run game to see how he takes that early. But he's definitely got to be in the number 2 spot.
Yeah, and then number 3, I know I just said it was a quarterback award, so I apologize. But if there's a player in the country right now who I think could get it done as a running back, I think it's Lan Larison, coach. And the running back UC Davis, coach, in only 8 games last year, he rushed for over 1,100 yards, 13 touchdowns, and on top of that, had almost 200 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns. Coach, he led the country with like 140 yards per game and didn't even play against some opponents where he would have stat padded against. They return so much talent, and their wide. So I'll say this, coach. I was talking with the coach about UC Davis yesterday. Their wide receivers, they have some athletic guys, but there's no one who's like that's the go-to guy, and we got to get on the ball every play. Lan Larison is going to get 1,000,000 touches if he can stay healthy. Me and Timothy had this conversation, coach, from like 2000 to 2000. What was it, like 9? There were like 6 2,000 yards rushers in the FCS. There hasn't been
That's
one
crazy.
since the turn of the decade.
Well, offense has changed.
Yeah,
Think about it.
agreed.
Offensive changes. I think that hurts that as well. And then, I think now, uh, I don't know if we'll ever see that again because if a kid does that at the FCF level,
Oh
he
yeah, he's
ain't.
gone.
Yeah.
He's gone. Like but luckily with Larison, I think if there's a running back this year who would make a push at that, it would be him. Just because I think he's going to get the touches. And also, too, me and Timothy kind of did some like looking across. Jaden Sheridan made a strong run at it. There were a few running backs who made a run at it. But also, too, Coach, you mentioned the evolution of offenses. The evolution of 2 running back sets or rotations has also greatly impacted that because especially with Sheridan, Coach, they had a goal line back that they would always take him out on, which limited his touchdowns
His
and touches in the red
touchdowns.
zone
Yeah.
and stuff like that. And I
Yeah.
think you being an offensive guy, I mean, even with Jarvion, you guys had a Nico Duffy. You guys had, people that you would rotate in and out with. And so I think that really it puts a tough ceiling on a lot of running backs hitting 2,000 yards. The last 2 guys on my list, CJ Montez for Fordham. Any quarterback is just automatically almost a guarantee to be a candidate for this. Coach, he was super efficient last year, first year starting behind DeMorit. And then I'm going to put him on here, even though I don't think he's going to win it. I do think his team's going to be good enough to get there. And if he puts up the stats with it, it's hard not to consider him. Cam Miller, North Dakota State at quarterback. I don't love his passing, but coach, you know this, his rushing stats are going to be there and his total touchdowns are going to be there. And that dual threat ability is going to give him the benefit of the doubt. And then real quick, my 2 honorable mentions, Will McElvain, Central Arkansas. If Central Arkansas is going to live up to all this hype, he's got to have a big year. And then 2, Caden Bennett, Sacramento State at quarterback. We got another dual threat guy who I think if he can do it with his legs, that those rushing stats are going to help him jump up there. But I would imagine one of those top 3 guys in Larison, Gronowski, or Gonzalez probably should be the odds-on favorite to take that one home.
I was waiting on you with the Sac State kid
Yeah.
because you're kind of driving that bus, but you're not really driving that bus. But
Yeah.
I was waiting on that one, and then the one that I was really waiting on, Montana State kid.
I just
The
as much
injuries.
and then also too with Montana State, their running backs are so deep that I just don't know if he's going to have as many
Enough.
as many touches. And then
I
2,
see that.
as unconfident as I am in Cam Miller's ability to be a dynamic thrower of the football, I don't know if Tommy Millott has it in him to throw for 2,000 yards consistently, like season to season.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
less confident in Millott's ability to throw the football than I am Miller. So if I don't have confidence that Miller can put up the stats that I want as a passer, I don't know if I trust Millott to do it, Coach. I'll be honest. And plus, their wide receiving core isn't elite, I would say. That
I
hurts.
don't. But I mean, and we'll move on. But I don't know if you have to throw for 2,000. I think if you just can be, but it's any given year. But I think if you can be a person that takes over games, have
Yeah.
those electrifying moments, have good numbers. He doesn't have to have great numbers throwing the ball. Have good numbers, 10 touchdowns, 2 INTs type thing. I think that can win it any given year as well. Now, if
So
somebody just goes out there and throws for 3,500 yards, you have no shot. But
yeah.
you know,
Uh, I agree, man. Shout out to Miak, Mike, man. Been a member for 21 months, man. Shout
hey
out to Miak.
now,
That's almost 2 years, man. Shout out to my guy. He's been one of the biggest supporters of the show, man. So shout out to him. Coach, so I got Malott stats. His best season was probably 2022. Played in 12 games that year. Let me just ask you. So, like, let's just extend this like 2 or 3 more games, I guess. If no, 12 games of regular season. So we'll leave it here. He had 1,000 rushing yards, 13 rushing touchdowns, averaged about 6.5 yards per carry, threw for 1,700 yards, 10 touchdowns, and 4 picks. Does that get him in the conversation?
I think so. If they're winning ball games, and they win the right ball game, I think so. If they pull one of those where it's a million people in the stadium and he just has one of those nights where he goes off, yeah, I think that puts him in the conversation. Those
That's
numbers
fair.
right there on a decent year, I think gets him invited to the dinner.
Yeah, that's fair. Now, to be fair, that year you had Jaden Sheridan rush for almost 2,000 yards. Lindsey Scott threw for like 7,000 yards, and Tim
Yeah,
DeMoret
he
also threw
went
for
crazy.
like. I mean, it was a lot. It was hard to get to that dinner that year. There was a lot of elite players that year. And same for Buck Buchanan that year. You had like John Pius and Zeke Vandenberg and David Walker. I mean, it was just some studs at that one. And yeah, I know it was kind of answered in the chat already. The Watcher. The Walter Payton strictly offensive. That's kind of like the Heisman of the FCS, and then Butt Buchanan is kind of like what the Bernard or something like that for FCS,
Yeah,
whatever the
defense player.
defensive award is. Yeah.
Yeah,
So Butt Buchanan, I think, Coach, everyone knows how I feel about this kid. The favorite, in my opinion, should be David Walker for Central Arkansas. I mean, 2-time finalist, Coach, 40 tackles for loss, 20 and a half sacks his first 2 seasons. This kid's primed to come out and put up just ignorant numbers in this defense. I,
yeah. If he
I
can
think,
stay healthy,
yeah, if he can stay healthy and that defense just lets him go do his thing. I mean, I was Coach. I think we posted the article yesterday, or Timothy did. He looked at the top single season defensive performances in FCS history, and right now, Coach, we haven't had anyone top that 20 sack mark. The closest was Isaiah Lamb with 19. But last decade in 2011, Adrian Hamilton at PV put up 20 and a half sacks. If
it's a lot of
any
sacks.
Yeah, that's a lot of sacks. That's crazy. In that same year, Coach, in 2011, there was a kid at Bucknell who had 13 picks in 1 year. That's just
That's taking it
if
away.
anyone's
That's
going to
taking
make
it
a
away.
that 19 sack mark by Isaiah Lamb, which is the record for this decade, I think is David Walker. I just think he has that potential, and he's great at run stopping. This is his ability. This is his time to prove that he's everything that we've been talking him up to be. These next 2 coaches are kind of tied. I feel kind of the same about their odds. And funny enough, they have the same first name. The Elijah Ponder at Cal Poly and Elijah Williams at Morgan State. I think both of those guys have a really, really good shot. You look at Elijah Williams, I mean, 37 tackles for loss, 20 sacks over the past 3 seasons for Morgan. The only question, the thing that gives me pause about Elijah Williams, Coach, is there's so much talent on that defense
Right.
that it's almost going to be like a race to see who gets the stats. Because then also you got Hunter behind him, who is also going to be going for the tackles and the tackles for loss and the sacks. And so it's just, is he going to be able to load? Because at the end of the day, coach, I know people hate saying that these are statistics awards, but the
They
statistics
are.
do hold weight. Like,
They are.
I think what people don't understand is it can't be one or the other. It can't just be film and it can't just be stats. It has to be a mix. Is he going to be able to reach the benchmark that you need to even get invited to the dance? And that's the
And
question I have about Williams.
because if you read the numbers from the winner last year, 14 and a half sacks, 65 total tackles, but 28 tackles for loss.
Yeah.
That's going to be tough if you've got 10 other ballers out there with you. Um, because at the end of the day, like you said, it's going to be, everybody's playing their assignment, and you're the bell cow of the defense. They're probably going away from you. So, the numbers play a part
Yep.
regardless of what anyone says. The number plays. You could be a dominant guy and they run away from you. Everybody knows you're just, you're killing whoever's in front of you. That means nothing if you have zero tackles, zero stats to back that up. So it is awards are stat driven.
Yeah, for sure. They got to be to a point. Like the way I like to explain it for my voting process is in my head, I set like a benchmark. And it's like, okay, like if I don't care if a guy has like 4 more tackles for loss than you, as long as you like, if we have 5 players, coach, that all have 15 plus tackles for loss and are in between 15 and 20, then we can move on and be like, okay, who's the best overall player? Who had the most impact? Let's turn on the
Dominate.
film.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you can be the best player in the subdivision and just had a bad year. But at the end of the day, if you got 4 guys with 20 tackles for loss, I'm sorry, you might be the better pro prospect or the better player overall, but I can't consider you if you only have 9 tackles for loss.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Because
I'm
at the end of the
sorry,
day,
but
that's,
it's
yeah.
it's just not enough. Now, Ponder has the opposite, coach, where he's surrounded by so little talent that they might have to quadruple team him at this
Yeah.
point. And
And,
it's
and,
going to
and
be,
scheme away from them.
yeah, that's going to be his problem. Now, 13 tackles for loss last year, 10 sacks. The good thing is he plays in a conference where he's kind of got a perfect balance, coach, where there's some teams that are going to air it out where he can maybe pad his sack stats. But you got a lot of teams who are running the football. And if you can get in the backfield and rack up those tackles for loss, you can have a 28 tackle for loss year like a Terrell Allen did, which is really going to, I think anytime you have, coach, where you're talking 28, almost 30 tackles for loss and like 19 to 20 sacks, it's just hard to argue regardless that you don't deserve the award.
That's playing on the other side of the ball, and that's a dominating performance.
Agreed. And my last 2 guys, coach, both linebackers, and I want to say I want to see the day, coach, that a cornerback wins this award, but a linebacker or a defensive end has won 21 straight Butt Buchanan awards. Coach, the only 2 players that weren't a D end or linebacker to win it was Rasheed Mathis at Bethune-Cookman,
NFL
that NFL guy, and then Al Lucas at Troy
back when Troy was
at FCS.
yeah.
I mean, and also too, because I've always had people ask me, coach, what do people have to do to, like win this award as a corner? Just to put it in perspective, guys, Rasheed Mathis had 14 interceptions the year that he won this award.
Why were they still throwing the ball to that side of the field?
And on top of that, was the 5th leading scorer, coach, just with his touchdowns on interception returns, punt returns, and also filling in for wide receiver.
Yeah, he wasn't just intercepting the ball. He was taking it the other
Everything.
way.
Everything. But the 2 linebackers, coach, Adam Bach, almost 400 career tackles already for South Dakota State. They lose 2 other linebackers, so I think he's going to be the guy. Last season, he was coming off of almost a season-ending injury, so I think it just took him a year to get back on his feet. 2 years ago, coach, 125 tackles, 2 picks, almost 10 tackles for loss. Those are the stats people are looking for. And then Micah Davey, son of a famous MLB player, if I'm not mistaken, coach, last season, 153 tackles in only 10 games.
That's playing ball.
That's everywhere. And McNeese was
That's
a
playing
bad
ball.
team. And so the good thing for Micah Davey, and this is no shot at McNeese, he might be on the field a lot because their offense was really, really bad. And so he might get plenty of chances to pad the stat box. And the honorable mention coach, Eric Hunter from Morgan. I kind of mentioned him earlier as at linebacker. And then a
Yep.
edge rusher / linebacker. I really like this kid, Coach Riley Wilson out of Montana. A guy who
Mm.
I think is a little bit underrated, really not talked about, especially because you had, what was it, Governor, you had some of these older guys kind of take the shine. But Coach, in his first season starting for them, 15 tackles for loss and 8.5 sacks last year. I think this is the year he kind of gets a bigger role on that defense. I can see him having a crazy year, and that's kind of my dark horse pick for the Buchanan.
I like the kid at Morgan. I fell in love with him last year. Got a chance to see them play, and I like him. I like him because if they are doing their deal up front, he's a backer that can run free, and that's going to give him an opportunity to start racking up on those half tackles, putting those things together. And then don't be surprised if Malachi Bailey jumps up there
Yep.
as well.
I was waiting for it too. I was going to say it if you didn't, so I'm glad you went there. Coach, let's get to this last topic. SWAC head coach rankings entering 2024. Obviously, our guy Lionel at PV versus Everybody started this off with his rankings, and it has made its rounds across the internet. Before we give our rankings, Coach, I want to get your opinion because I've been kind of vocal about this. How do you rank first-time head coaches?
That's tough. And for me, with this, it's probably not fair, but for me with this, I went where I view the program. Let me put it that way. Where I view the program that they're taking over, what I can remember that he has in the cupboard. If he was a head coach somewhere else before, that would be a lot easier. But for first time guys, I think you just got to go with the program they're taking over because to me, that's going to dictate that first year. I don't care if you're Bill Belichick, if you go to a program that doesn't have a lot in the cupboard, which happened his last year in New England, no matter how great you are, you're only going to be able to whip up so many meals with pork and beans and coleslaw. You're only going to be able to put so many things together to become higher in those rankings. So first year guys for me, that's really not fair. But if you're holding me to the gun to come up with a list, that's how I come up with my list.
Yeah, I'm with you. I just it's some projecting. I think it's tough when it's like I'll say this. I think looking across the conferences, let's remove the Pioneer, some of these smaller conferences. Looking across the FCS, the SWAC is one of the harder ones to rank because you only have one coach that has been in his program for over 4 years.
A lot of New Year, not
Uh,
a lot of first time guys
Yep.
sprinkled in with guys that were interns for a short period of time.
Yeah, because it's tough with like a Terrence Graves because he's 2-0, but how much stock are we putting into winning one game at the end of the year? Now it's a
Yeah,
big game. It's the Bayou
no doubt
Classic.
about it. No doubt
Like
about
I'm
it.
not taking away from that, but that I don't know if that's a tangible. Like I don't know how much that transfers to being a head coach throughout the full season, dealing with the ups and downs, dealing with injuries, dealing with locker room politics, recruiting strategy, running a whole program. It's not the same as being an intern for a week.
No, I was going to say it's not the same as having 2 weeks to hold it in the middle of the road
Yeah,
versus your arch nemesis. If your kids don't get up for that, then
exactly.
you're in trouble anyway. So it's not like week one, week zero, and you've got to constantly get those kids ready. You got to constantly get your coaches ready. You got to constantly make sure that things are happening across campus the way they need to happen. There's just so much going on. But for that 2 week stint, all you're worried about is your rival, and that's that. So,
Mm.
a lot of a lot of things in between that interim for those 2 weeks don't get.
No. Now, we'll start at the bottom. We'll work our way up. Coach, I'll kick it off. At 12, I got Chris Dishman. If we got to rank first-year head coaches, I think he's the most unproven right now, and he steps into one of the
Tough
most
situation.
difficult situations, I think. Now, he gets a returning quarterback, which is a start, but I just got a lot of questions about the overall trajectory of that program, even though they do return some guys. I just think Chris Dishman has the most question marks surrounding him, especially because he gets deducted points from me, Coach, like you said, because he's a first-year head coach we don't know. And also, two, it's just that program hasn't been super competitive. So, therefore, I got
I
to put
can't
him at
speak to that.
12 here. I'm sure. Yeah, I know you
I
got to
can't
agree
I
with.
can't speak to their competitiveness.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. Okay, for me now,
But
Coach and I
I had
have
the same
another.
one.
Yeah,
No, I had it at the same spot, but just when you're talking about the program's competitive, I can't speak on that for the last 2 years.
yeah. 11 for me, Coach. I think 10 and 11 were close. I gave one coach the edge because he won the matchup. They're two second-year guys. They won the head-to-head. So I got Kendrick Wade at 10 and Alonzo Hampton at 11.
I'm with you
And I mean, they both.
for the same reason.
Yeah, they neither of them won much. And D-Lob, that's like what I said. Coach is only going to rank 1 to 11. We know who's number one. He ain't going to put his boss at 10. Like, it's okay. He said, he was like, don't do it, Coach. Don't rank him.
No, 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 no.
Listen, I don't know how Coach does it, guys. So that's why we appreciate him on the show, man, because there's not any other coaches who'd be on here doing what he does, man. Coach, this one's going to be so controversial. At 9, I got James Colsey.
Mm. That's where we vary. Um, at 9, I have uh, Raymond Woody, uh,
Ooh.
just because of the way they started. This is his second year. I know the potential's there, but that's where I have Coach Woody.
I like it. I know Colsey has a lot of coaching experience. It's just, I mean, the difficulty to come behind Willie is
But he's got
just,
some stuff in the cupboard.
yeah. Oh, I'm not
Again,
saying,
this is just my
yeah, yeah,
thinking. Yeah, he's
yeah.
just got
I'm
things in
with
the
you on
cupboard.
that. He's got some stuff in the cupboard. He's more of a like a prove it thing. Like I think for me on my list, 7 to 9 is like they're just all kind of the same to me. Like they're very unproven. It's just I just think he faces a difficult situation. And the only reason I had Terrence Graves above him at 8, Coach, is because Terrence has proven he can win in the conference, and he's been in the conference for a long time. So I just gave him a little bump there, but I wouldn't mind switching Graves and Colsey 8, 9. I think they're right there with each other. And then I just gave the edge to Raymond Woody because even though last year was just like an unwinnable situation for him coming off the year that they were having, had to replace so much talent. He's been recruiting at a super, super high level. I just gave him the bump because you got I'm not putting 2 first-year head coaches over a guy who has already been in the conference, if that makes sense. So that's
Yep.
why I kind of gave him the edge, but I wouldn't mind switching Colsey to 7 and switching it around. But I think Woody, Graves, and Colsey are all just kind of like tied at 7 for me.
Yeah. And um, I had, Graves under that, but
Yeah.
um, right after that, just because of what we're talking about, um, I throw Grambling in that slot.
Ooh.
Um, first year, I know they're making a lot of noise, but they also lost a lot of pieces out of that cupboard as well.
Ooh, I like it. Now, what are we at 6? I got Joseph at 6. I know it seems kind of crazy. It's just I he stepped into I don't really take his record in Nebraska into account as much, Coach, just because he was an intern. And unlike Graves, he didn't just have to win one game. He stepped into a terrible Nebraska program and was forced to coach damn near the whole season, facing
Hmm.
all of these allegations and what Scott Frost just destroyed in Lincoln. And also too, I'll look at him, I think the recruiting base that he has in the state of Louisiana, where he built that wide receiving core that went on to be one of the greatest wide receiving cores in the past decade or so at LSU as the wide receivers coach. gives them a bit of an edge. Now, I do agree, though, the returning cupboard is not what it needs to be. We've talked about this on the show. Lost their offensive line. Both running backs are playing FBS football right now. The coordinator hires, we'll see how that works out. There's some question marks, especially surrounding the offensive hire. I do think, though, Mickey Joseph overall, just in terms of an overall coach, is a little bit more proven than a Graves or a Colsey. But I'm not going to argue if you have him a little bit lower just because he is a first year head coach.
Yeah, and that's just because, like I said, in my opening, when we're talking about first year guys, it's the program that they inherit. To me, it's the program that they step into day one. You are 0-0. If you've got, the cupboard full, expectations are a little different. If you lose a lot out of that cupboard, to me, that is kind of how I put it, 1 through whatever for me.
That's
Especially
fair.
if there's no track record. There's no track record to go off of,
Right. Who you got at 6, Coach?
At 6, it's as my man Ocho says, stay with me now. At 6, I have Connell Maynard, and this is because, again, now he's the only one that has won a championship in the conference, but since that championship, it's been a slide.
Oh, okay. Dang, I had him way higher than that. Okay, top 5. Let's get in top 5 now, because I think once we get to the top 5, way easier conversation to have because everyone has actual experience.
Mhm.
At 5, Coach, I have Cedric Thomas. At 5, now the one disclaimer with him, and I think people forget because there was a big debate. I think it was on Scotty's channel in the chat about this. People forget Cedric Thomas built that team that went on to compete for a SWAC championship in the spring.
Yep.
That was Ced's team. And I think that's why he's looked at a bit different, in my opinion, than other first-time head coaches, is because he's proven that he can take a program like UAPB and build a contender in the SWAC. And that separates him from other first-year head coaches, which is why I think out of all the first-year head coaches in the SWAC, the new hires, he's the most proven out of all of them.
Because he's been there before.
He's been there in the conference. And also, too,
before.
as much as it, listen, I'm not going to act like Alcorn just has a million resources and is, loaded, but Alcorn is an easier place to build a team than UAPB. And so
I'm debating that one.
I don't know about that. Now, I do think Cedric Thomas should be somewhere in the top 5. Now, the question becomes, Coach, do you give him credit for building UAPB, and is that enough to bump him over some of the other coaches like a Maynard and people like that? And it's like almost how many points, like if we were ranking this, how many points does Maynard being on the hot seat impact him? Because I have Maynard at 4. Just going to go ahead and put that out there. So I got Maynard, then Ced in my top 5. And the only reason I'm putting Connell over Cedric is because there's no head-to-head to base it on because they haven't went head-to-head as head coaches yet. But
Actually,
2,
not yet, but they have.
Yeah, not yet. Yeah, but Maynard did win it. Like, I get the spring thing and how it shouldn't count as a full championship, but at the end of the day, out of all the teams that went on the field and played, Jackson played. I want to say Texas Southern played. UAPB played. Southern played a few games. Like South Carolina State played. Even though that's not the conference, they did play them. They won the games that were in front of them. And so I get that it doesn't count the same as if, I agree with the MEAC fans that say they can't be HBCU national champions because there were too many teams in the HBCU sphere that didn't play. I get that argument. But to say that they're not SWAC champions or that SWAC championship doesn't count is crazy because if any other school won it, they'd be claiming it. And
they definitely.
I think the big take back for some people is that the defending SWAC champions didn't play, which was you guys. And does that change if you guys are in there? Because I think you're confident that you guys beat UAPB. If if you guys play. So I get the drawback of that, but at the end of the day, he's the only person in these rankings that has won a championship. And so you have to take that into account at some point.
I'm with you on that. But again, it was from that championship for me, and what's happened up to this point is why I have him there. Five, I have Cozy, just because he walks into a situation that has things uh, to be able to hang his hat on. There's enough ingredients in there for him to be able to put together a few meals uh, that makes it look like he at least knows how to cook, if that makes sense in that
Yeah,
kind of analogy.
that's
So
fair.
that's where I put him at.
Yeah, that's completely fair. Now, obviously, Sed's one for you. So once we get up to one, I'll discuss my number one because Coach's list is out of 11, or no, Coach's list out of 11. Says is kind of in his own spot. Coach, 3, 2, and 1 for me. I think we're probably going to order these very similar, excluding Sed. I got Bubba at 1, E-Rob at 2, and TC at 3.
So I have TC at 3, E-Rob above him because he won the head-to-head,
Yeah.
and then Coach McDowell because they played for it.
Yep. So we got the same, quote unquote top 3. I think that's where I kind of was. Now, I will say if you took away the head to head, because E-Rob does have the 1-0 advantage over TC, and he did it on Jackson's homecoming on the road, which adds even more value to that win. I do think TC had the much tougher rebuild than E-Rob. Because you look at when E-Rob came in, you return Bubba. You return Adrian Maddox. You return Mikey Victor. You returned that defensive line 2 years ago. Like, you had some talent on that team. You had Keyshawn Johnson. Like, you had some dogs on that team. Like, let's not forget, their running backs going to Ole Miss right now that was on that roster when he got there.
Right.
TC came in, and Coach, it was like walking into a ghost town. You're like, is anyone here?
There's a lot of people took flight. I get you. I'm with you on that.
But it's tough not to count the head-to-head, right? At the end of the day,
Right.
like, what matters is on the field. And then also, too, I think Bubba's got to be number one right now because outside of Maynard, who is super on the hot seat right now, Bubba just won the division last year. And when
Yeah.
nobody was predicting them to win it, Coach, we were on this show. Obviously, you had Alcorn. I had Alcorn. The media, SWAC Media Day, had Southern. People were talking about Grambling. People were
Yeah.
talking about Texas Southern.
It was all over the place.
Everybody was picking. The only team that was not picked above PV was UAPB going into last
Yeah.
season. And
It was all over the place.
they came into the year, and now if you want to say they backed in, whatever, it doesn't matter how it got there, but they went on the road and beat Alcorn, a tough place to play, a really good team. They beat Alabama State to end the season in a must-win game because they lose that game, you guys go because y'all beat Jackson. So they won the games that they were supposed to, and you got to give them credit on some level for that. They beat
Definitely.
Southern to end the year. I mean, they did what they had to do. So I think you got to give Bubba the benefit of the doubt. Now, there were some people saying you should deduct him because he didn't win the SWAC championship. I just don't like. Who do you put him behind because he lost the SWAC championship?
No. I disagree with that because all he did was get his team uh, to the finish line, and that to me that's what it's all about, right?
I'm with you on that one. But I mean, we have pretty similar ones. I just think if you took, I think from now on, the rule should be is if it's a first time head coach with no head coaching experience, we just can't rate them. Like if you just take them
Yeah.
out,
I could go with
then
that. I could go with
then
that.
it becomes such a because like let me ask you this real quick because we got a little bit of time. That took a little bit quicker than I thought it would. I'm sure the comments are going to be wild on it. The MEAC, less teams. I think it's a much more easier rating. Now the question becomes, Coach. Obviously, Lee Hall's probably at
Who's in the
last.
top spot? Yeah.
Yeah,
Who's in the top
I
spot
think
to
it's
me?
I think it's an obvious number one. But I think the debate happens in the middle, Coach. Do you take what Chinnis Berry did at Benedict Do you value that more than what Dawson Odoms did at Southern? That's the conversation.
I don't think you can take what hold on, I'm trying to find my keys for my daughter. I don't think you can I don't think you can do that just because of the level, the difference. Hold on one second.
You're good. So yeah, while Coach does that, y'all let me know in the chat. Like, what would y'all's top? I'm gonna just do 5 MEAC rankings. Obviously, I think Lee Hole's got to be in 6, and me personally, I would put Trey Oliver at number 1, and then you would go
Not so
to
fast, my
Howard.
friend.
Okay, here's why. Let me argue it. Okay, I understand what happened last year, and Howard winning, and maybe you put Larry up there, but Trey Oliver is the only coach to win it and go win the Celebration Bowl over that Jackson State team was way, way, way more loaded than FAMU last year. And they went in there and beat Jackson in the Celebration Bowl with Shador, Travis Hunter, Kevin Coleman. They went and beat them. And then also, too, they also went to the playoffs and were dominating Richmond until Davius goes out of the game with injury. I think Trey's accomplished more, even if Howard won the conference last year. Central also finished the same record as them, and they were better in out of conference. They went out and beat Elon while Howard was getting their heads beat in by some Ivy League schools. I just think Oliver's overall resume is better than Larry Scott's right now. I get it. It's tough not to put the defending conference champion number 1.
Yeah, I mean, because that would be my 1 and 2.
Oh yeah,
I'm assuming you have. I'm assuming you have Larry at 2. Okay,
yes,
that would be my 1 and 2. Larry would just be 1 for me.
I just think the Celebration Bowl outweighs winning the conference one year.
I get with it. But I mean, it's not like you're talking really, really in left field. So I mean,
no, yeah,
I get it.
I'm not saying it should just be like Larry Scott at 4 or nothing like crazy like that. I think it's 1A, 1B. It's just, it's tough not to be like, bro, you won it all. You were an HBCU national champion and beat a Jackson State team that people were saying were unbeatable.
It made it look easy.
I wouldn't say made it look easy. They did go to overtime, but to be fair, that offense, that Jackson State that year, their defense was kind of like their calling card to a point.
And
they went out there.
I mean, that's what it was.
Went up and down the field on them.
Yeah.
They didn't know what to do with Davius.
Yep, I agree. I just
and
this year I have Larry as number 1.
And Paris, the only reason I used the head-to-head is because that's the only head-to-head meeting they've ever had. TC and E-Rob have only faced off once. Larry Scott and Trey Oliver have not just faced off once. Because if you go by that, Trey Oliver wins the head-to-head because Trey's beaten Larry more times than Larry's beaten Trey. So that's why you can't use the head-to-head. Because if you use the straight-up head-to-head, Paris, Trey wins.
Well, that was my head-to-head because TC and E-Rob, the first one, E-Rob won in Jackson. So that's why I had him above TC. Yeah.
I'm with you on that. I'm trying to look up real quick, like the overall records, because if I'm not mistaken, that was the first time. Was that the first time that Howard beat Central in a while, right? Last year? If I'm not mistaken. So. Yeah, it's been a minute because I'm just trying to look up their overall records real quick. Man, why?
I think it was at least in a 3-game swing. Well, no.
Because how long?
Maybe 2.
Yeah, I think it's 2, if I'm not mistaken. So, Coach, so let me ask you this, okay? I want to put it in perspective. I'm just trying to give people the information. This is a good debate. Trey Oliver is 29-18 with a Celebration Bowl victory over 4 seasons with Central, not including the COVID, obviously, because they didn't play. Larry played 2 games in the COVID year, went 0-2, both losses to Delaware State, by the way. and still has not had a winning record in his career at Howard. That
I would
he's
have lost that one.
14-22 as a coach
Yeah, I would
right
have
now
lost
at
that one.
Howard.
I would have lost that one.
So that's oh god, that's a tough one.
Yeah, I would have lost that one. I
Yeah,
would have lost that one. But I'm still holding one and two.
now let me ask you, okay, because this is a conversation too. Who do you have at 3?
That's where it kind of gets tough because you know I think once you get past the 1 and 2 mark, to be honest, I think it becomes. Hold on one second. My daughter just decided to crank the car up.
I'm back. You got me?
I got you.
All right. I froze up. Now, if you can repeat what you said, because I lost everything, man. I went out.
Oh, okay, cool. I said now to me that's where it becomes tricky because you know, according to me, I don't know what's left in the cupboard at South Carolina State.
That's fair.
You know, but then I also know that it's whatever was left should still be able to compete and win versus Delaware. No disrespect to them. Um, but it becomes to me that it should be enough to compete and beat Norfolk. So I think you have to go Morgan just because, and then South Carolina State, Norfolk, Delaware for me. That's how that ends.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, so my personal rankings, I think, would be Damon Wilson at 3,
Uh-huh.
Odoms at 4, Chinnis at 5
Uh-huh.
is where I would put it, because I do think at the end of the day, to say Dawson Odoms wasn't successful at Southern is kind of an overreaction, I would say.
Yeah, that's crazy because I mean he played for back to backs.
Yeah, so like I understand now. The reason I know that you don't like the, D2 to the D2 to FCS comparison, all that kind of stuff, but I do think when you look at his overall, like what he did, what Damon did at Bowie is much more impressive than what Chinnis did at Benedict.
I can get with that.
He won, just to put it in perspective, Damon won 7 division titles, 3 conference championships, was the coach of the year for the conference 3 times, and won 2 Black College National Championships, and also won multiple games in the D2 playoffs. Something that Chinnis could not do.
Made a heck of a run that year, no doubt.
But also, too, you look at like a Dawson Odoms, does what he did at Southern outweigh that? Because he won a SWAC championship, 4 division titles, was the SWAC coach of the year, and coach he won 9, 8, 7 games almost every year.
Every year. Yeah, year
of his
in, year
tenure.
out.
But I think the difference is I just think his Norfolk success has been missing.
And that kind of goes to my whole with where I put Coach Maynard at, because you win it and then it just kind of goes from there. So I may have to change location. The lawn service just showed up, but we can keep going. But I'm with you on that because that's my reasoning with where I had Coach Maynard. Even though he's the only coach in the conference that's won it, when he won it, after he won it, it's just been kind of a downward trend, so to speak.
Yeah, that's kind of where I am. But I mean, I wouldn't even mind if you. I think Odom's and Damon, like it's almost like a tie for third spot. Like I don't I get the argument either way. It's just how much stock are you
Do you
putting
want
into
to
their previous stops?
right? Do you want to go overall, or are we on the what have you done for me lately?
Yeah, if you're specifically talking about MEAC, I give Damon the little bit of advantage because he faced a tougher rebuild, and they were what, one game away last year from competing
Yeah,
for it. So
yeah.
I get that to a point. But man, coach, this is a good conversation. You guys let us know in the comments. Man, y'all can go all the way back. Let us know who all the FCS people, man. Let us know who your favorite is for the Walter Payton Butt Buchanan in the comments. Give us your SWAC head coach rankings, man. We're going to talk about some of the best of them on the next episode, man. Me and coach will get together. We'll find a time to do another live show next week. But I got some plans. Me and him, we're going to talk about a schedule. Also, too, starting June 1st, myself, Timothy, we're bringing you guys conference previews. We're recording episodes on each conference, breaking down who's the favorite in each conference, surprise players, turning it into a whole article. We're going to do full conference in-depth breakdowns of every conference across the FCS. So, man, stay tuned for that as well. Me and Coach are working on getting some Coaches Corners guest lines up, Coaches Lounge guests lined up. So, man, stay tuned for that as well. We're going to have a bunch of content over the next few weeks, man. The offseason does not stop this show whatsoever, man. But coach, any final thoughts, man?
Who do y'all want in the lounge? Put in the chat, inboxes. Who do you want in the lounge? And if you know anybody personally, tell them don't be scared, man. Come on, talk with us. You know that. Shout out to my high school. Made it to the Final Four in baseball. Lost in a heartbreaking fashion, man. 3-2 on a pass ball, and state champ. A little short, but we were there. Shout out to Mulberry Senior High School baseball team. And again, keep rocking with us. Hit that like and subscribe.
Speaking of baseball, coach, what can we do to get Alcorn baseball turned around, man? I saw some like crazy scores this year, man.
If you know any pictures,
Nice.
if you know any pictures, if you know anybody that's close to Derek Jeter talent, uh, Aaron Judge's talent, get at me.
Oh,
I'll
man.
I'll get you in touch with those guys. Yeah, again, that was another tough situation. He was hired 2 weeks, and it was a couple years ago, no doubt, but he was hired 2 weeks before the school year. So,
Oh, gosh.
it was essentially like they do in high school. You put up the tryout signs in the cafeteria in the library. Whoever
Mm.
shows up out there, man, that's just kind of how it goes. So it's been tough for him for the last couple of years, but
We got to come recruit the
hopefully.
251. Listen, I tell him I got someone. Listen, now this is a few years away. Tell him he's got to get that job security up so he can still be there. But my guy is one of the best pitchers in the state of Alabama as a freshman right now, playing varsity, throws some heaters, and he's one of the best players in the 251 area code. Tell him come get on Faith Academy.
Faith Academy.
We'll have to go get him. But guys, man, make sure to hit the like button. That's crazy. Maryland Eastern Shore went 0-48. I don't think that's ever been done in the history of baseball.
We aren't that bad.
That's crazy. That is
We aren't that bad.
insane. But guys, man, hit the like button, subscribe, comment below, follow us on social media, all that good stuff, man. But for myself, for Coach Fred, we are out for right now.